On today's show, the Hawks lose a shootout in close-fought fashion, a very high-scoring affair in Atlanta on a Sunday evening. We'll get into how it unfolded and why it unfolded, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1916 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here in the tail end of February. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel. Right now, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, get $150 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel, place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify. That also includes YouTube. Please like this video as you're watching it, comment, etc., and please tell your friends and family about this podcast. And we'll be diving in on today's show to what became a pretty wild game, actually. 148 to 143 in favor of the Pistons in Atlanta on this Sunday. The third loss in a row for the Hawks in close-fought fashion. Honestly, all three of them. Also, the last time the Hawks will see the Pistons this year, other than a potential play-in matchup, I suppose. Ultimately, a 3-1 series win for the Pistons this year against the Hawks, all of which were pretty competitive games. And now Detroit, by the way, is red hot. They've now won 6 games in a row. They were great in this game in a lot of different ways. But look, a lot happened here. It was maddening in some respects. The Hawks came all the way back after being trailing for the most part in the second half. They led narrowly a couple times in the final minutes of the game, but a couple of missed opportunities in the last minute and a half or so offensively. And Detroit just kept coming all night long. And obviously the score is robust. I would say it's probably not quite that much offense compared to what you're seeing, but it certainly was an offense first game all the way around. And by the way, the highest scoring game of the season that was not an overtime game for the Hawks in terms of total points on both sides. So Atlanta scored a lot, and defensively, it was not the best. In fact, we'll dive into that right now as far as like my analysis is concerned. Later on, we'll get into how this game unfolded, kind of my more granular notes about certain observations and lineups and all that stuff. At the end of the show, we'll get into our player evaluations. But first, look, it was a slow start for the offense and some crunch time issues as well. But for 48 minutes, you can't possibly ask for more than the offense did tonight for the Hawks, I would say. And this loss is largely on the defensive end of the floor for Atlanta. So, look, the number one thing of what happened in this game, while you could sort of argue about why, and I will get into a little bit of that on this podcast, is that Detroit had their best shooting night of the season. This was game number 57 for the Pistons, and it was their best shooting game of the season. They had season highs in effective field goal percentage, 69.9%. That's a new season high for the Pistons. They also had a season high in true shooting, 71.2% there for the Pistons. And they also tied their season high with 23 pointers. It's tough to overcome that. Obviously, there are ways to overcome that. The Hawks nearly stole this game despite that at the end of the game. But it is just, as a general rule, it's very obvious, of course, the Hawks are going to have a hard time, as any team would, winning a game, even at home, when their opponent does that, shooting-wise. And look, some of that, I'm going to be very clear, some of that is tough luck. The Pistons made a lot of contested threes in this game. For one thing, I think particularly Cade Cunningham in the first half was out of his mind. Tim Hardaway had some in the second half. I thought Malik Beasley had some in the second half. Those guys are real shooters, so it's not like that's not a hat tip to them by any means. I thought the Hawks were certainly a little bit unfortunate with how that broke in this game. But at the same time, and it's important to note that I'm saying this, the Hawks also were not good defensively in this game. Both can be true at the same time. I know that nuance is dead in some circles, but the Hawks were both not good defensively, and the Pistons were great offensively. That is the case in this game. And that kind of leads you to where Detroit scored about 1.3 points per possession for the entire game, despite a fast-paced game. And it was a very fast-paced game to get to 148. That wasn't quite indicative, but still, they were really, really efficient in this game. And look, defensively, it was rough a lot, but the bench numbers were better than the starters in this game. The Hawks had some pretty hideous defensive numbers. In fact, there's one that I want to pass along right now. The minutes with Okongwu and Niang at the 4 and the 5, the Hawks had a 154 defensive rating in about 20 minutes with those guys on the floor together. And that kind of showed through. Again, some of that's shot making by the Pistons. Rebounding stuff was a little bit, curious at different times in this game. But in the end, it just wasn't good enough defensively. And I've been saying this a lot this year. If you're a new listener, you may not have heard this. This has been a defense-first team this year for the Hawks. They have been better defensively, full stop, than offensively for the season. They rank higher in the NBA defensively than offensively. That's the case right now. But personnel-wise, it's still limited in some respects, especially when you're having to play a little bit smaller with Niang, with Okongwu, et cetera. And then offensively, the Hawks were really good in this game, but I wanted to at least lead with that. It was a mess defensively at times. And look, on top of the shooting numbers on the perimeter, Detroit also shot 80% at the rim. And that's a little bit more on the defense, I would say. It was pretty not great around the rim defensively. Now, I will say this on the somewhat positive side. The Hawks decisively won the margins in this game. When I say the margins, I mean the stuff that's beyond the shooting in this game. So they ended up with 8 more shooting possessions, which is a lot, actually. And they forced 19 turnovers this game. They actually took full advantage of them. The Hawks had 30-plus points off turnovers in this game. So that was encouraging. They did well on the glass as well. It is actually very wild to lose a game when you shoot as well as the Hawks did, which we'll talk about in a second. When you have that kind of shooting numbers as that Atlanta did, and you take more shots than your opponent, usually when you have a great shooting night like the Hawks did, not great, but pretty darn good, and you also win the possession battle, you're going to win. But Detroit was so absurd with their shooting in this game. Again, part of that's Atlanta on the defensive end, that they still weren't able to win it. So, honestly, a lot of it's a hat tip. I got to say, as an objective analyst, I thought in particular Cade in the first half, and then Beasley and Hardaway at times in the second half, etc. Lots of big time shot making from Detroit. Hat tip to them. They played great. They're playing great. Quinn said that post game, as did Trey. They've won 6 games in a row. They're playing really well right now. But frustrating to say the least if you're the Hawks, and not the greatest defensive game of the season. In fact, one of their worst of the season, I would say, as far as the process and the results across the board. Now, on the other side, this will be shorter, but the offense was actually plenty good for Atlanta. I know that there will be time later on in this podcast to talk about the end of the game. And I know a lot of it's frustration of a loss, and I understand that fully. It's always going to happen. But you can nitpick certain things at the end of the game. The Hawks missed opportunities. I get all that. They were still more than good enough offensively in this game to win it. They had a 127 offensive rating. Full stop. You can stop right now. The Hawks scored 1.27 points per possession in this game. You're supposed to win when you do that. That's very simple when that's more than enough offense, basically. They had their best shooting numbers in a loss. So of all their losses this year, they had their best shooting night of the year in a loss tonight. Now, that wasn't their best shooting night overall, but of all the losses, their best shooting game was tonight, which makes sense. When your opponents have their best shooting night of the season overall, that's why. But the Hawks were still only 53% on twos in this game. They had a rough one. If you missed it, I broke down the game on Thursday. My short synopsis of that game was that the officiating was terrible, and also the Hawks couldn't make a layup. That was the two things in that game. Tonight, the Hawks were not great inside the arc, especially early on. They got better as the game went along, but they were just okay from 2, but they were great from 3. They were 21 of 45. You never want to waste that kind of shooting night for the Hawks, and they did in this game. That's really unfortunate. The Hawks are not exactly a great shooting team this season. In fact, it was a season high in threes for Atlanta, and you lose. That's tough to swallow, obviously. They did miss 10 free throws. Now, that sounds worse than it is. I always want to point that out. You can't assume you're going to make every free throw. I know these guys are pros, but no one shoots better than 80% of the line as a team, and the Hawks are in that 77-ish% range. So, I get that. But even if you were to make the Hawks season average from the line, they would have made 2 more, and that would have mattered in this game. So they didn't shoot terribly from the free throw line, but they did miss enough. They actually were really good taking care of the ball. That was an area that the Hawks have struggled in at times this year. They only had 13 turnovers in a high-paced game. They had about 11% turnover rate. That's actually excellent. Man, low turnovers, you make a bunch of shots, you get offensive rebounds. They did a lot well in this game offensively, and that was just not quite enough because the defense wasn't good enough. So, look, long story short, I'm obliged to point this out, and there's a contingent of Hawks fans that don't like when I say this. The Hawks were underdogs in this game. And I'm not saying that's gospel, but they were betting underdogs at home. They were 3-point underdogs according to my friends at FanDuel. You don't have to like that, but it's good context to say, I saw some words being thrown out there about how this loss was catastrophic. And look, it was frustrating to be sure, but similar to Thursday, it's a bad loss in some respects. It's frustrating, but it's not like losing to the Wizards. It's not like losing to the Blazers or, some bad team. Pick your bad team, Hornets, whatever. But all in all, to lose both Thursday and today, both of which I thought were coin flip games, and they played out that way, honestly. So to go 0-2, that is not great, obviously. It's frustrating. Clutch issues tonight, as we'll get into later on. I would say the quote-unquote true, like simulate these games 1,000 times each, you probably win one of them a lot of the time. Both of them sometimes, and go 0. You go 0-2 sometimes. Unfortunately, they go 0-2 here, so that at least the frustration is their third loss in a row if you date back to before the All-Star break. And also impactful because both the Magic and the Pistons are teams that you're trying to battle with in the standings. So I get the frustration level. I just would take a step back. I always try to give that a little bit. Look, when the Hawks win, I get accused of being too low on the Hawks. When the Hawks lose, I get accused of being too high on the Hawks. That's part of the nature of the beast here, but that's what happened in this game. The Hawks were not good enough defensively. That's frustrating. Offensively, they were good, actually. They wasted that good night. But in the end, like, not a totally damning result, but not one that you're excited about either, and I do understand that at this point. All right, we'll get into how this game unfolded as far as the game flow, my observations, my notes, etc. At the end of the podcast, we're going to do player-by-player evaluations. First, though, we're from our partners on the show. Today's show is sponsored by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, and you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 points or more in a game, you can score a huge deal the next day at DoorDash. It's simple. Any player, 50 points or more during the 24-25 season, Dash Pass members get 50% off and order up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. After an epic performance, 50 points or more, celebrate by ordering wings or pizza or burgers from your favorite places delivered straight to your door. Or perhaps if you're a night owl like I am, happens to be, honestly, I'm a big night owl, and you're needing a snack late at night, use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving also big on that. If you want lunch on the go, you can also use Dash Pass to get your favorite meals, $0 delivery fees, and reduced service fees as well. Plus, now you save even more with this exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 points or more in a game, members of Dash Pass, 50% off on an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders on participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. All right, and to the observations in this one, the Hawks did a pretty good job getting to the rim early on, I thought. In this game, they had good juice. I thought Trey had juice early on. They had, hit 6 points in a row. They got to the line 5 times immediately. And really, this entire game, they got to the line 36 times. They were aggressive. They were effective getting to the rim. The finishing was better than it was on Thursday. Not great, but there you go. Rotationally, 9 guys appeared for the Hawks. No big surprises. It was the starters that it's been the last 4 games, and then it was Niang, LeVert, Mann, and Capella off the bench. No Don Barlow in this game. They started Mo Gay. Mo played 12 minutes as a starter and was not particularly good in this game. We'll talk about that more later on. But that was at least notable to me. And then it was a heavy Niang game off the bench because he was red hot. He actually had 7 threes in this one to tie a career high. But that was kind of the rotation. They were down by 3 at the end of the first quarter. It was actually kind of funny. They were not good offensively in the first quarter. It was a very fast-paced quarter, but it took a little while to get going offensively, despite the fact they were really good for the whole game. They shot 6 of 17 on twos in the first quarter, which was similar to what happened on Thursday. This time it was more floaters than layups, but still a slow start there. It did get better at that point in time, which was nice to see from there. Risacher, who I thought was great in this game, had a great sequence early in the second quarter. He actually had a 3. He made some plays defensively that were kind of subtle, but also important. Then had a great pass to Okongwu for a layup. And then after he fell down hard on his back, actually had an awesome 3-point play. He kind of finished this like circus left-handed shot. He was really good here. I was really encouraged by that. If you're looking for a bright spot in this game, I certainly would circle Risacher as that. Not because like the numbers were off the charts, but he was obviously, they were pretty good. And he was just really, really solid and mature and under control. And I've loved what I've seen from him in recent days. But look, they had all kinds of trouble with Cade Cunningham in the first half. And I love Dyson Daniels' defense. I think he's one of the best defenders in the league. It might be a situation, and look, he's not the only guy that will have this. There are often guys in the league who are great defenders, and not great, not good, great, who have matchups that they struggle with, and this might be one for Dyson. Cade is giving him fits all year long, so that's notable. Now, Cade is bigger. He's not a speed guy. I think Dyson is a little bit better generally on guys who are speed reliant, a little bit smaller. Dyson's plenty strong, but Cade is bigger and more physical than Dyson is. And for whatever reason, Cade is not bothered by Dyson. It doesn't seem like. So anyway, that's one thing. But also, when Cade's making his jump shot the way that he was tonight, there isn't much you can do with him. And he made a bunch of like heavily contested shots in that first half. How about this? He had a new season high for threes in a game, and he did it by halftime. He had 6 threes in the first half. That was a new season high for a game. He tied his career high for threes in a game in the first half tonight. He set a new career high tonight in threes with 7. So like Cade's a decent shooter. He's not a sharp shooter by any means. Like Cade does a lot of things well. He's very good. I like Cade. I've liked him for a long time. He's shooting 35% from 3 this year. He's not like a marksman, but he was unconscious in the first half, which is notable. I think he had 29 and 10, just crazy stuff in that first half. Anyway, that was big. They gave up a 10-2 run late when the Pistons just kept making every jump shot, honestly. But the Pistons had this crazy quarter in the second where they shot 73% from the field and 7 of 10 from 3 in a quarter. Tough to know what to even talk about beyond that. That obviously just made everything, and you're going to be losing when that happens to you. Now, in the second half, the Hawks came out, and I didn't love this, but I didn't hate it either. They were very, very aggressive on Cade after Cade had gone nuclear in that first half, right? So the best example I can give you in recent years or seasons or whatever for the Hawks is the game that Luka had 70+ in Atlanta. I was there. In the first half, they played it straight up. He absolutely just torched them the entire half. After halftime, they doubled him all the time. And it didn't work, for the record, as far as like the overall. It stopped him from scoring as many points, but he just had easy passes for easy buckets the whole second half. Now, it was better than that this time. It did kind of work, but they were definitely aggressively doubling Cade. What I would say is I liked it as a wrinkle, but they did it a little bit too long for me. I would have gone back a little bit to more base defense. Now, part of that is that I'm a process person, and I think that Cade almost certainly would have cooled off to some degree because he was running hot. You would have had some regression to the mean with his shooting in the second half, playing him straight up. So I would have just done that probably after it kind of worked. But I think because it kind of worked early in the third quarter, Quinn stayed with it. I thought if you watched it back, and I've seen the game now twice in the second half, a lot of good looks that the Pistons were able to generate because it was just like 1 or 2 passes away. A lot of also some mistakes in the back line. They kept leaving Malik Beasley, which you don't want to leave. He's their best shooter. So it's a nuanced thing. I didn't love that the Hawks stayed with that as long as they did, but it kind of worked. At least it was a little bit better after halftime. But obviously there's some nuance there. Also, they took Mo Gay out of the game in like a minute in the third quarter. Now he put him back in, but I wonder if that was a message being sent to Mo, who made some mistakes in this game. But I thought that was always notable there. Here's one that I will note that came up big later on. Quinn had an absolutely terrible challenge, like terrible. Now I will say, Quinn's actually, if you look at the numbers this year, Quinn and Brittany Donaldson, who do this kind of together, the Hawks assistant coach, they're actually in the top 10 of the league in challenge success this year. They've actually done a better than average job with challenges by the numbers. This was a terrible one. It might have been the worst one of the season, honestly. Now, it was kind of a no-hoper. Like, Trey got called for a foul on Jalen Duren, and, like, it was pretty obviously a foul, even in real time, like to the point where Kevin Chouinard and I, who sit together at games, we didn't even know they challenged. It was going. I thought it was just a timeout because it was like, okay. And then they announced that the results of the challenge, and I was looking at each other like, why did they even challenge that? There was no way they were going to win that challenge. And beyond that, it was a 2-point shot in the third quarter by a center who isn't a great free throw shooter. So that kind of lessens the variance or lessens the impact of it. It was Trey's first foul. It made no sense, just to be honest with you. Now, I don't want to overstate that. Like, it didn't like lose them the game, but man, it was impactful because they could have used that challenge later on. That's why I'm saying that now. That was a factor later on. They didn't have it anymore. The Hawks did have a nice run mid-quarter, but the Pistons did answer it with their own 12-3 run late in the third, and the Hawks were down 11 late in the third quarter. And then they got hosed at the end of the third quarter. Now, look, I've gotten reaction to this. I stand by what I'm about to say. Trey gets a steal in the backcourt that might have been a bucket at the buzzer because it was a free layup, probably. He was called for a foul. I didn't see a foul at all, to be honest. Now, people saw this on the replay like, well, he kind of grabbed his arm. Guys, if that's a foul, then every play is a foul in the NBA. Like, that's not if you watch the play, it's not a foul. And it just was not a call you can make. I hated it. I don't have time to go into it any more than that on the podcast. I'm going to run out of time. I hated that call. And also, it gave the Pistons a phantom free throw because it was a inbounds play, so it was a free throw, which that hurt. Anyway, they're down 12 with like 10 minutes to go. And then we're pretty strong to get back in the game. Like, the Hawks, to their credit this year, always seem to get back in the game, which is a nice aspect. But I'll fast forward a little bit here. They got down to 4 after a 3 by Niang and a floater by Trey. They traded buckets a little bit. Risacher had a big corner three when they were actually down by 8 with like 4 minutes to go. And honestly, should have been a 4-point play. Risacher got drilled on the play in the corner. It wasn't called. He got up and he was mad. And he's not a yell at the refs guy. He was mad at that non-call. And by the way, I love that he closed the game. I thought he should have played more in the first half. He played the last 10 minutes in a row, which I love to see. And I want to note this now. Karis LeVert, who's by all accounts a really good vet, during the timeout late, he actually was kind of counseling Risacher, like encouraging him. And Risacher was basically replacing Karis on the court. It's a small thing. I just kind of saw that in the huddle, but I was like, look, that's a good vet. Like, you're closing over me, basically. I'm gonna help you, which is good. That's what we want to see, but it's just a little thing. And I like the Hawks close with Risacher, who was, again, really good in this game. Fast forward a little bit more. Dyson gets a pick 6 for a dunk to tie the game with 2:30 to go. That was impressive. Trey, it's then a deep 3 from the left wing for the lead with like 2 minutes to go. So the Hawks hadn't led in a very long time. Then it was a couple of exchanges of buckets. Cade made one. Dyson answered that one. The Hawks had the ball up 1 with about 1:10, 1:05-ish to go. And Georges Niang, who had been red hot, hit 7 threes in this game, had an open 3, top of the key, and missed it. Just a little bit long. Risacher gets the rebound in a jump ball with Cade. But if that shot goes in, different game. It's one shot, didn't go in. There it is. Now, there's a jump ball, the biggest one of Risacher's career to date, which is kind of funny, but it's true. He wins it, but crucially, after a jump ball, the shot clock is only 14. And the Hawks, they didn't there's no play to run there. Trey takes a shot that was not a good shot, to be very clear, with about 5 on the shot clock. Now, could he have taken one more dribble? Sure. He missed it badly, which is why I'm talking about this now. I'll come back to that, but it was not as big of a deal as people thought it was. I would just say that. Now, they probably just need to go faster in general, but they allowed a 3-point play to a shooter on the other end of the floor. So they would go from up by 1. Could have been 4 if Niang's shot goes in. Could have been 4 if Trey's shot goes in or whatever. Doesn't go in. Shooter beats Niang. I won't play the audio because it's pretty long, but Niang gave a very candid and impressive answer, I thought, post-game to David Lee in front of the podcast about that play, where he basically just copped the fact that he should have forced Schroeder more to his left and Schroeder beat him to the right. And obviously, point guard against Niang in space, didn't look great. 3-point play, tough. So that happens. Then you kind of fast forward a little bit. After a timeout, Trey misses a floater that he basically, makes a lot of the time. And that's tough. Two shots there that they probably couldn't have had. Dyson then gets a block on Beasley from behind and on a fast break that I didn't think was a foul. Now, it was not a crazy call, to be fair, but the Hawks couldn't challenge it. They didn't have a challenge. There was probably 3 or 4 plays in the last quarter that the Hawks could have challenged and maybe won, and they couldn't challenge because they burned the challenge earlier. That was why I brought it up earlier. Tough scene. Then Trey draws a foul down 4, and Detroit, though, actually had its challenge. They challenged. They ruled it that Trey initiated the contact, which is probably the right call. And then suddenly the game's basically over at that point. It wasn't over, but that was a huge swing. If you get the foul call, he makes both, you're back in the game. Instead, it's Detroit's ball. And I'll fast forward a little bit now. Like, they actually needed some help late, and they got a little bit of help. Detroit missed some free throws. Trey gets fouled, but just couldn't pull it off. And I'll kind of fast forward a little bit. So one thing I wanted to note here, I kind of alluded to it already, but there was so much focus. And again, I get it because it was probably frustration online in my mentions, other places, about the shot that Trey took with 49 seconds to go. Again, 5 on the shot clock. He missed it badly. I understand that. But that was one play. And, process-wise, it was not a good result. I mean, very clear. Not a good shot. But, you would have thought that was the only thing that happened in the last 2 minutes. I'll just say this. That's part of what happened. That's one bad play. The Hawks also missed 2 fantastic looks in the last 65 seconds of the game. The Niang 3, and Trey had an open floater that he makes a lot, and they both missed it. If one of those goes in, it's a different game. If they both go in, you probably win the game. Instead, they both miss, and you lose. And it's a make-or-miss league. That happens sometimes. That's part of it. And look, I get, again, frustration is part of the thing, but inevitably it spirals into silliness about, Trey's not clutch or Trey stinks and all these things. I'll just give you some numbers real fast on Trey's clutch performances this year. Not the end all be all. Look, there's the clutch stats at NBA.com. They're not perfect. They don't always tell the perfect story, but Trae Young currently leads the NBA in clutch points and clutch assists this season. Number 1 in the league. Also with 61.6% true shooting in clutch situations. So if you're acting like Trae's bad in the clutch, you're just not in reality. That's where we are. Now, he obviously doesn't always make the right play. Like, he's not perfect. Tonight, he missed the floater was a bad miss. Like, it's an open shot. He misses it. It is what it is. But he's also, by the way, I think like second or third in betting odds for clutch player of the year. So long story short, the Hawks had chances in this game. They came back from 12 down in the fourth quarter impressively, and they were winning in the last couple of minutes. It was very similar again to what happened on Thursday. And I'm not telling you not to be frustrated about that. It was a frustrating loss. I was a little bit less frustrated than I was on Thursday. That game was, I thought, worse than this one, but it was winnable, and they didn't win it. And the Hawks have actually still been a little bit better in the clutch this year. People realize, like, they've actually won a lot of close games, but the ones you lose in close games, people remember, and I get that too. So in the end, maddening at the end of the game, but they had opportunities. They just missed them, and I'll leave it there for now. All right, we'll get to the player-by-player evaluations in just a second, but first, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is getting started, and there's no better place in the world to get on than America's number 1 sportsbook, and that is FanDuel. With FanDuel, you also place live bets throughout the game, so even if you have to miss the tip-off for whatever reason, or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, et cetera, stay on the action with FanDuel. The live betting feature also keeps moments of the game exciting all the way through, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets together into a same-game parlay at FanDuel. Plus, they have all the offers that you're looking for, from like over-unders to point spreads, money lines, player props, game props, futures, etc. And the app is really safe and secure at FanDuel as well. And they cover the entire range of sports. That includes the NBA and the WNBA and college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, hockey, golf, tennis. They have soccer, both domestic and international, F1, NASCAR, boxing, MMA, and so much more. Plus, the app is really easy to use at FanDuel. And when you win, you get paid instantly with the folks at FanDuel. Plus, if you're a new customer right now, get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com. Join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official betting partner of the NBA. All right, to the players in this game. 9 guys appeared again for Atlanta, as I covered a couple of these things already on the podcast, but kind of a good summary at the end here. The bench minutes did not go super well, when you factor in the LeVert and Mann minutes. So Terrence Mann, 14 minutes, minus 12 in those minutes, 2 points, 3 rebounds. He had some rough moments, missed 2 free throws. Also, Trae got into this post-game, but there was a moment in the second half where Mann probably needs to cut to the basket, and Trae thought he was. It would have been an open dunk, and it said it was a turnover. And that's just a miscommunication. It's just a new guy being a new guy, and Trae brought it up unprompted, basically, just to say, like, we just talked about this. It's part of the thing. I know that fans don't want to hear that, but like when new guys come, it is different. And that was an example of that. I think a pretty shining example of that. But Mann was fine. Not great, though, by any means. Kind of still figuring out what the best role is for him. LeVert, 23 minutes, 7 points. He's been really good in Atlanta. He was not great tonight, which I think was part of why they closed with Risacher, who was just better. But, LeVert was 2 of 6 on twos, 1 of 4 from 3, minus 13 in his 23 minutes. Just not his best overall. Clint Capella, 8 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks in 18 minutes, 3 for 3 from the floor. I thought Capella was actually pretty good in this game. A couple of high-profile Capella-ness things, like he dropped a pass from Trae that was rough for sure. But I thought he was pretty good defensively. The numbers with him on the floor defensively were actually pretty good in this game. I think they had like a 115 defensive rating, which is not great, but it's way better than they were overall. And they were, dead even 0 plus minus with him on the court in the game. So I thought it was the best that he's looked so far since he came back. That's at least notable a little bit. And then Niang had a big shooting night, 27 points, big time stuff there. 7 threes, a new career high, or at least a tie for career high for Niang, 7 of 14 from 3. He is not afraid to shoot, which I definitely appreciate. Get him up, George. Keep firing. He's, by the way, their best shooter. Other than maybe Garrison Matthews, who's not playing right now. Niang's a great shooter, and that's a real thing. So keep that going up. Obviously, defensively, he is limited. I thought he was okay until the couple of spots at the end, but I thought if you're focusing on him as like the problem, I wouldn't say that. But defensively, it was a little bit rough in this game. Mo Gay, 12 minutes as a starter is not very many, obviously. 2 points, 2 rebounds, had a turnover, 1 of 4 from the floor, 0 of 2 from 3. I thought Mo just kind of was lost a little bit in this one. Defensively, not the same impact that he's had for a while. And then offensively, he's just an unfinished product, we'll say offensively. Defensively, he needs to be really good defensively to make an impact. And tonight he was just not that. And that's kind of why he had a short leash. Look, how do I say this nicely? I think people were thrown off the scent a little bit by Mo's big game against Milwaukee and decided that he was like ready, and he's just not, and that's fine. He might keep playing, but him starting is the Hawks thinking that he's one of their best 5 players. He's obviously not. He's starting for they must like Niang in the bench role. You might see Don Barlow in the future, etc. But I thought Mo was just like kind of not great in this game. Okongwu was also not awesome, I didn't think, but good passing numbers. 16 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, no turnovers. I thought he had a pretty good offensive game for the most part. Defensively, it was not his best work, I didn't think. It was not only him by any means, but I think he got beat up a little bit on the interior by Duren and even by Stewart at times. And then a couple of just like weird moments, like Tobias Harris like blew through him for a layup at one point. That was kind of frustrating. But I thought he was pretty good on offense, not great on defense in this game. Risacher, 19 points, a game best plus 10 for him in a loss. So they were minus 15 with him off the floor in the game. 2 steals, 2 blocks, 3 assists, 6 rebounds. I thought he was really, really good in this game. Won't go overboard on it, but I think that, this is actually, I think it's like 10 of the last 11 games now. He scored 11 points or more. It's not only about that, but he's been aggressive. He does the little things really well. I am loving what I'm seeing. If I'm a Hawks fan, I'd be thrilled with Risacher right now. And I get that he's not the big flashy guy or whatever. The bust stuff is so funny. It's so ridiculous. But I think he's playing really well, honestly. And I hope people were like actually watching to see that. Dyson Daniels. Weird game for Dyson. 24 points, 6 assists, 4 steals. Obviously, that's really good, right? 7 of 11 on 2s, 3 of 3 from 3 from Dyson, but also probably his worst defensive game of the season, which is funny because he did have 4 steals, but, Cade got him pretty good in this one. That's going to happen. Like, it doesn't mean that Dyson's something bad, but it was not a good night for him defensively by his standards. Still made a lot of plays, made a couple of big plays late, had a big steal that was clutch, and that pick 6 at the end of the game. So it wasn't like he was bad, just not his best defensive work, but still they were good when he was playing and not when he wasn't. So there's that. And then Trey. Obviously not the greatest ending in the world with the now infamous shot and then the missed floater, but it's kind of funny because he had 38 points on 31 shooting possessions, which is really good efficiency, and 13 assists. Now, he had 7 turnovers. That's more than you would want. I will say that. But it was a fast-paced game, and, when you have 13 assists and you have 38 points, you can kind of live with that a little bit. A couple of them were bad. So it is what it is. But I thought Trey was pretty obviously good in this game. Maybe if you want to knock him down for clutch importance, then that's fine. But to think that he was bad in this game is very silly. Also, the Hawks were +2 in his 38 minutes. So they were -7 with him off the floor in 10 minutes. And there you go. So yeah, I thought Trey was good. That's controversial. I don't know what to do, but there you go. All right. From here, the Hawks play again very quickly from now. They play Monday night. So there's an early game tonight, 6 o'clock start in Atlanta. It's a 7:30 traditional start in Atlanta on Monday, but they play the Heat. Now, the Heat also have the back-to-back, and they had to travel. They were actually in Milwaukee. That's a tough back-to-back for Miami. So that's at least a little bit helpful for the back-to-backness of it all for the Hawks. But it's no time to rest after this one. The Hawks actually are, I believe, once again, a very narrow underdog at the moment. Yeah, at FanDuel, the Hawks currently, as of Sunday evening, are a 1-point underdog. So another basically 50-50 game. Similar to the last two, actually a little bit smaller line than the last 2 games. But one that obviously want to get, they play the Heat twice in 3 days. They play the Heat on Monday at home, and then they go to Miami on Wednesday. What you don't want to do is lose both of those games. So even I'll be the first to say that, I'm very level-headed, but you don't want to lose 5 in a row, including 2 to Miami here. So you want to get one of these. Obviously, the easier one, quote unquote, will be the home game, but we'll see how they fare in just about, as I'm recording this podcast, I don't know, 20 hours from now, etc. So stay tuned for that. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Please like the video as you're watching it, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at BT Rowland. Sorry, that's my at. The show's is at Locked On Hawks. Also follow my Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and also follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. As always, please stay tuned for the podcast tomorrow and beyond. Again, one more time, please subscribe to the show. I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you all next time.